Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're continuing, what if Sasuke met a Naruto no one really knew? His entire life changed. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more Naruto what if stories. And comment below. Sasuke will discover the truth. Now sit back, watch till the end, and discover what Sasuke learns about the Naruto no one truly knew. Let's begin part 4. He didn't have his coffee that particular morning, so he was sound asleep. Uzumaki Naruto was sound asleep in geometry class. He was sound asleep in Zabuza's class. Needless to say, he paid the price. He woke with a start when he felt something unbelievably cold being splashed on top of his head. Naruto screamed like a girl and flew 4 vertical feet. He landed 1 meter away from his desk. How many feet did Naruto's body travel? Don't know the answer. What the hell are you doing in geometry then? Naruto picked himself up and wrung the water out of his hair. He peered accusingly at Haku, who was smiling his apologetic smile with a water bucket in his hand. Zabuza was at his side as he normally was, and had that peculiarly approving look on his face like he normally did. Haku turned and bowed before the sadistic math teacher gave him permission to go back to his desk again. Naruto's shirt was wet, Naruto's hair was wet, Naruto's skirt was wet. To sum things up, Naruto was wet, and about as mad as a wet cat. He resembled one in the respect that he hissed and attempted to shake the water out of his hair. He was contemplating whether or not to give Haku, the cross-dressing jackass, the silent treatment. He had it up to his eyeballs with this, "Zabuza's so nice to me," bullshit. The guy was a prick. Naruto secretly yearned for the opportunity to squeeze the life out of him with a scarf. Why a scarf? Naruto's mom made him wear one to school that day. Was it a sign? Maybe someone up there wanted him to get rid of Zabuza and save all the poor little mortals. Maybe. He wasn't going to do it though. His head would probably have been separated from his body before he got within 5 feet of the sadist. To top it off, Zabuza would probably tie his head to the top of the flagpole just to hear students and their parents scream. Stupid dipshit. Naruto'd get Zabuza one of these days. Hopefully with his head still attached to the rest of his body. He spent the rest of the class trying to wipe the smudges of eyeliner off of his cheeks. He paid absolutely no attention to Zabuza, who was strolling around the room, silently daring anyone to make a sound. Naruto cast a few accusing glares at Haku. The boy only smiled and shrugged his shoulders. The blonde rolled his eyes. This was Zabuza's lapdog. Sure, the dark-haired man practically tugged Haku out of the gutter, but Haku had no free will. Where was his rebellious I don't give a damn teen spirit? Something was screwed up. By the end of class he made up his mind that he wasn't talking to Haku. Naruto pointedly speed-walked off into the hall before the little puppy could catch up. Ha, take that, fiend. Naruto hopped into science class, where he met his not-really ex-boyfriend. His relationship with Neji had been a short one, and he cried a little when they broke up. He recalled the after-effects of the event. Sasuke seemed unusually smug that day, and Gaara was happy, which was rare. Naruto felt an odd sense of freedom a few days later. After he cried his eyes out, of course. He thought people were supposed to feel like shit after they broke up. A reverse effect, he supposed. Kind of like when you get drunk and your body is supposed to be on the verge of falling asleep, but you're bouncing off the walls with hyperactivity instead. Naruto did that once at one of his mom's crazy street Patrick's Day parties. It was fun, until he broke something, then his mom made him do push-ups. Doing a workout when he was drunk wasn't the easiest thing in the world. Nor was it fun. He definitely had the energy to go through with it though. The balance, that was a different story. Enough talk of weird things. Naruto'd had it up to his neck with the abnormal. Hi, Neji. He fell gracelessly into his seat next to the boy. Neji glanced over at his friend. He averted his eyes, but immediately second-glanced and stared at the blonde with an eyebrow quirked. Naruto tilted his head, then glanced down at his soggy outfit. He laughed nervously. What on earth? Neji trailed off. Fell asleep, explained Naruto. Asleep, Neji repeated, his eyebrow climbing even higher up onto his forehead. Yeah, that bastard of a math teacher had his pleasure slave pour water on me to wake me up. Zabuza has a pleasure slave. Yeah, he's a dog, you know, a golden retriever type. The ones that will jump off a cliff if you command them to. Zabuza screws golden retrievers. Yup. Neji's face went blank and he shook his head. You are a sad, strange little girl. I think I'll make up my own story, thanks. Naruto was quite pleased with himself. That's right, Haku, you're a fluffy little bed slave. Chew on that. The blonde laughed evilly to himself, causing the Hyuga to glance his way once again. Naruto stared right back at Neji, who had an oddly smug look on his face. Naruto frowned and blushed. He knew that look. His uncle always had it plastered on his face when he was thinking about something tasty. What are you thinking about? He asked him warily. Neji snorted and shook his head. If only that shirt was white. Pervert. Naruto blushed furiously and swung his fist at Neji. As one would assume, Neji ducked and the blonde's fist connected with a nearby bookcase. He stifled a screech as his knuckles thudded against polished wood. He drew his hand back and cradled it in his lap, sending nasty glares in the Hyuga's general direction. I thought you didn't like me. Naruto hissed. I don't, replied Neji coolly, but you know how guys are. Our minds are hopelessly twisted. Bastard. Neji smirked, but you're so flat-chested, there wouldn't be anything to see. Naruto cracked an abashed smile, chuckling nervously more to himself than to anyone else. You have no idea. Ahem. Both boys swung around in their chairs to find Kusakabe-sensei tapping his foot at the front of the room with his glasses pushed high up onto the bridge of his nose. Naruto could feel rather than see the eyes of all the students boring holes into his chest. Now that I have the class's attention, Kusakabe-sensei started his usual rambling and Naruto felt the urge to sink into his seat and disappear. Did the whole class overhear everything he and Neji said? Naruto was embarrassed to the point where he actually did shrink into a ball in his chair. He pulled his legs up to his chest and buried his face in his knees. He wanted to die. The classroom suddenly jumped when the blaring sound of what Naruto imagined to be a dying rhinoceros screeched into the room. It was a fire drill, he supposed. Neji calmly rose out of his chair and helped the hopelessly embarrassed blonde out of his seat. Kusakabe-sensei was already leading the class out of the room. Naruto covered his ears when he and Neji left the room at the back of the line. Why did they have to make these things so goddamn loud? Sure, Naruto was used to noisy, blaring music that made the subwoofer in the back of Temari's car explode, but this was insane. He swore the person who invented alarms modeled the sound after a dying mammal of some sort. Squeer. Squeer. Neji walked slowly and silently at his side, as if he didn't really give a damn if they got caught in a raging inferno. He probably didn't. Neji was too good to panic. Stupid perfect people. Soon they were outside and Naruto removed his hands from his ears. It was unusually cold today, which only added to the discomfort of wearing damp clothing. Neji wasn't much help. When Naruto attempted to snuggle up to him, he only made a scene about what a baby he was. Baby, huh, why doesn't he try wearing a wet skirt and shirt in the wind in the middle of fall, That would teach him to poke at bruises he'd never felt. Bitch, you look like death, Naruto. Gaara had wandered his way over to the fuming blonde. Naruto sneered, you should like that. Is that why you came over here? Gaara only stared up at Naruto with blank eyes. Actually, no, he announced remotely. Naruto frowned quizzically, then why? I came over here to use you as a shield from the wind, idiot. Oh ho ho, Gaara's not so tough after all. Naruto elbowed him in the side. Gaara's only response to this was to roll his eyes. Naruto watched his friend closely. He was acting strangely. He seemed off. His attention didn't feel like it was directed at Naruto. Gaara's eyes were darting right and left, like he was looking for something. Or someone. Cha-ching. He grinned evilly at the fire-haired midget. Gaara apathetically looked up. What? He droned uncaringly. Naruto only looked away, laughing it off. Oh, nothing, nothing. He glanced over his shoulder to see Gaara shaking his head the way he did when he thought someone was hopeless. Despite the cold, the little cogs in Naruto's brain were turning. Did Gaara have a girlfriend? He gasped mentally. Was it Sakura? No, of course not. He hated Sakura with a vengeance. Ino. No, not the pig. Or maybe he really was a queer. Who could he possibly like though? He thought about it for a while. The redhead really couldn't stand people. He hated loud, obnoxious people. He hated people who didn't think before they acted. He hated tough guys too. Naruto fit into a few of the Gaara doesn't like categories, yet he was Gaara's only friend. Think, Naruto, who, besides you, can Gaara stand for more than 2 minutes? Who does he see for an hour or so each day? Who else eats lunch at the ramen shop? Who has silky, long, raven black hair and pale blue? Oh, my God. Gaara eventually got bored and walked off, not even pausing to stare back at the flabbergasted blonde. Naruto's eye twitched. He liked Neji. Oh my god, who would have thought? Gaara was capable of love. And love for the bastard who dumped him, no less. Wait a sec, how did he factor into the whole breakup ordeal anyhow? Maybe Gaara was the reason they broke up. Maybe he convinced Neji that Naruto was wrong for him. Maybe it was all Gaara's fault. Nah. Sasuke meandered around the school grounds like a zombie. He was well aware that his skin was pale, his hair was messy, and that he was slouched over like, well, a man who slouched a lot. He was also aware of the fact that he had dark circles under his eyes the size of Texas. Size, he was about to give up. His brain didn't have the energy to curse his rhyming. He had gotten no sleep last night. He figured that if there were tranquilizers in his heroin, he'd at least be able to get to sleep when he wanted to. But no, his drugs just had to screw around with his head until he was fantasizing about a giant spider on his ceiling. It was huge. The thing had to be at least twice the size of his couch, if not bigger. It had giant, bloody fangs like butcher knives, gangly, hairy legs, and it talked to him. It sounded just like Kisame, and all it would say was, "Don't make me break my foot off in your ass." He wouldn't go to sleep for fear that it might eat him, or rape him. Both, he really didn't want to go through at the moment. Now that Sasuke thought about it, he never would have been afraid of the spider if he was sober. He would have laughed at the thing and told it that it was fake. But he was on drugs. Therefore, he really couldn't tell, and he didn't care. All he knew last night was that there was a talking spider on his ceiling, and that was good enough for him. Sasuke-kun, oh dear god, smite me now. You have to stay with the class, Sasuke-kun. Rules are rules. A nameless girl was jogging after him with a sheepish grin on her face. She caught up to him and blushed profusely. You can come and stand by me, Sasuke-kun. She grabbed his wrist and started tugging. Sasuke's mind snapped. No one touched him, especially not girls he knew nothing about. Except for Naruto, but she had too thick a skull to be afraid of what might happen to her. Sasuke found himself predicting that he'd have to get used to those spontaneous hugs. Back in reality, the girl stopped pulling, noticing the rigid state of the person she was trying to carry off. She looked back at Sasuke. What's wrong, Sasuke-kun? She asked with innocent eyes. Get away from me, whore. The girl instantly released his arm, staring at him as if she were going to burst into a river of tears. Sasuke was not in the mood to be merciful. He felt like shit, his arms already itched somewhat, he had to profess his love to a girl yesterday, and his sleep had been prevented by a giant, talking spider. The girl continued to shrink. You can stop giving me the Bambi who just saw his mom get shot, gutted, then loaded onto the back of a truck and driven away. Look now, scoffed Sasuke. The girl sniffled, hiccuped, and then exploded into a magnificent display of delightfully leaky waterworks. Sasuke walked away with a sick satisfaction at his vile temper. If anyone wanted to with Uchiha Sasuke today, they'd better prepare themselves to have their asses lightly simmered in a white wine sauce and served to them with a spritz of lime. Oh yes, Sasuke was feeling delightfully evil today. He had a generous amount of pain and suffering to deal to the world for the shit it made him deal with. Sasuke rubbed his head. Damn migraines, always ruining an already painful existence. The turmoil on the front lawn of the school wasn't helping, either. There were kids running this way and that, babbling about how they wished there was a real fire so they could skip school. Teachers tried and failed to take roll call as people ran from their respective classes to chill with their posses. Ghetto slang, another one of the very many things Uchiha Sasuke hated. Through his hazy state of mind, he spotted Naruto chasing a rather pissed-off Gaara around the base of a tree. She looked so cold and wet. Blah, no mushy shit, Sasuke. He slapped himself in the side of the face, only to regret the fact that it magnified his massive headache. As he got closer to the two comrades, he could hear a part of their conversation. Ah, come on, tell me, Naruto, stick that nose of yours into someone else's business. No, Gaara, I won't stop bugging you until you tell me what's going on. What was this? Another one of Naruto's whiny need-to-know moments. He didn't need to hear it. He'd heard his share of whining on Naruto's part. Come on, Gaara, who's the lucky dude? Okay, now they had Sasuke's attention. Who says I have a boyfriend? Then the redhead hissed under his breath, I might not be queer like you. Queer, like you? This was making less and less sense. Who's queer? Naruto and Gaara both stopped dead in their tracks and stared at him. Gaara glared daggers, while Naruto's blue eyes were as wide as saucers. Whoa, Sasuke must have accidentally spoken his mind. Naruto suddenly burst out in hysterical laughter. Gaara had a slightly guilty expression on his face as looked over his shoulder at the insane blonde. No one's queer, just a thing we call each other, you know, hi, queer. And stuff like that, we're all straight as pencils, yep. Ha ha, no gay cross-dressers here. The only girly boy in this school is Haku. Only Haku. Naruto's jaw snapped shut and Sasuke saw an inhumanly red blush bloom across the bridge of her nose. Gaara let a frustrated, troubled sigh escape the confines of his lungs and he shook his head slowly. Sasuke was clueless. What the was this with cross-dressers and gay people? He groaned, what the air you talking about? Naruto smiled like she was relieved about something, it's nothing. Really? Then Gaara cut in, glaring like a cobra whose tail had come inches from being stepped on, how much did you hear? For once, Sasuke didn't know what to say. He only leered warily at the two peculiar people standing in front of him. What the hell? Gaara rolled his eyes and walked off, leaving Sasuke with a rather embarrassed-looking Naruto. The blonde called after him with a furious gleam in her eye, you get back here, you jerk. Gaara didn't bother to turn around. Instead he just waved his hand about in an uncaring manner, you have to deal with this on your own. I thought we were best friends. Naruto whined, clenching her fists with shimmering eyes. Sasuke only crossed his arms and pressed his lips together in a fine line. What the hell were they talking about? Was she a lesbian? No, she wasn't, elsewise she wouldn't have had that talk with him the other day. Plus, weren't lesbians supposed to be buff? Naruto was the weakest loser he'd ever set his eyes on. Unless Naruto really wasn't a girl. Whatever, just whatever. Sasuke wasn't going to toss the idea around. Naruto was a chick, sure, she had the flattest chest in history, but she was a girl. He would never like a guy, even if he didn't know this person was a guy. Never, ever, I hate you, Naruto screeched at the receding form of Gaara. That's nice. The redhead raised his voice in reply. Sasuke watched as the blushing blonde furiously gritted her teeth together and growled to herself. He sighed exasperatedly and continued to massage his skull. So, Naruto nervously scratched her head, which led Sasuke to believe that there was more to the queer thing than he thought. He quirked an eyebrow, waiting for the blonde to continue. Wow, you look horrible. Blatant honesty without knowing she was being blatantly honest. Mother of Jesus. Thanks, Sasuke croaked, casting Naruto a muted glare. The clueless girl only assumed a look of deep concentration, like she was staring at a huge zit on his face. Oh, God, did he have a zit on his face? Sasuke Uchiha was ruined, his flawless appearance had been destroyed. Oh, please, Naruto, don't say anything. You look even worse than yesterday, the blonde announced, much to Sasuke's joy. He sighed to himself. At least he didn't have a zit on his face. Hallelujah. Are you getting any sleep? Naruto inquired with a worried tone. Sasuke gave in. He wasn't in the mood to think up a lie as to the reason he looked the way he did. Now, he wouldn't tell the whole truth, but a partial truth wouldn't hurt. No, I didn't get any sleep last night, he sighed. Naruto's face inched closer to his, why? Because, Sasuke growled, there was a spider on my ceiling last night. You're afraid of spiders? No, but this was a pretty big spider. Wow, how big was it? You don't want to know. Gaara has pretty big spiders in his basement. He likes them. They're about as big as a walnut shell. Bet your spider wasn't that big. No, Naruto, this was a big spider. Like how? Like as big as your house. Liar. Whatever. You haven't even been to my house yet. The blonde girl piped up suddenly. Sasuke stepped back. No, I haven't. He leered warily, do I want to go to your house? Naruto tapped her foot on the ground. No, probably not, she paused, but you're coming anyway. How does after school today sound? Sasuke scoffed and knitted his brows together, I hired you to do a job, you know. What about my house? Your house is hopeless. Sasuke resisted the urge to throttle the blonde and throw her corpse to the crows waiting on the fence. Naruto whined pitifully in the face of the fuming Uchiha boy. Please, she begged, pretty please. Oh hell, doe eyes. She was giving him the doe eyes. He could resist that look from any other girl. He'd just scoff at them and spit in their faces like he did to that other girl earlier. No female in the world could possibly pull the look off, and get Sasuke to feel even a drop of sympathy for her. But Naruto, she was just too goddamn adorable. She was so cute it made him sick. Her blue eyes shimmered and her lower lip quivered in the most sickeningly cute fashion possible. With those whisker marks on her face, she looked just like a baby fox that Sasuke had saved from drowning in a river. Fine, he growled condescendingly. The blonde yipped with joy and sailed into the air. Sasuke watched for a time as her mouth worked, explaining to him how they'd both have so much fun together. Her tongue was moving so fast, that he wondered whether or not she was speaking English. She giggled incessantly like any other girl would if Sasuke had agreed to go to their house. Speaking of other girls, Sasuke glanced over his shoulder to see that every single girl in sight was glaring hatefully at the giddy blonde. Their eyes burned with jealousy as they exchanged whispers and dirty looks. Interesting, so news of his announcement had spread like wildfire after all. That's right, bitches. Sasuke doesn't like any of you. He likes a little blonde ditz who couldn't tell right from left if her life depended on it. Burn in hell. Sasuke had apparently stared at one girl for too long, for she suddenly fell over backward and her friends gathered around her, fanning her face. You know, Sasuke turned back to Naruto, they all hate you now. Naruto raised her eyebrow and put her hands on her hips, they who? Sasuke rolled his eyes. All the other girls, Dobi. Naruto smiled and her expression softened. She closed her eyes, they hated me from the moment they met me, Sasuke. Sasuke was somewhat confused. Weren't girls supposed to get angry or at least burst into tears when they heard something like this? Was Naruto retarded or something? No, Naruto wasn't retarded at all. At least not in the emotional sense of the word. Mentally, hell yes, but not emotionally. Perhaps she was just different. If girls were capable of being different, anyway. No, Naruto, they hate you, he emphasized, hate, just to get the point across. Naruto's smile only got wider, I already know that. Sasuke gritted his teeth. This girl had absolutely no idea what jealousy could make potential rivals do. There was no telling what kind of torture Sasuke's fangirls could perform on the poor, clueless girl. He decided to take his explanation further. They want to kill you, Dobi, Sasuke hissed, do you know why that is? Naruto tilted her head. No, said the girl uncaringly, why? Sasuke sighed exasperatedly. This girl's skull was at least, what? As thick as the Berlin Wall. Because I hang around with you, idiot. When the blonde didn't show signs of understanding, he elaborated, they like me. Any girl would kill to be you, even if it meant really killing you. Sasuke expected the blonde to come to the grim reality of it all, that she was going to be a walking target among the girls of the school. Sasuke was infinitely surprised when Naruto struck a dramatically triumphant pose. Then let them fight me. The girl held up her fingers in a victory sign, I can take 'em all. I'm not about to hand you over to a bunch of lousy 10-cent whores. Sasuke was further taken aback when Naruto shook her fist and catcalled to a nearby group of girls, saying, hear that? You're all whores. Bow to me, lowly bitches, for I am the queen of all whores. Upon finishing her statement, she promptly burst into howling, maniacal laughter. Sasuke was tempted to warn her of the consequences of her actions, but decided against it. After all, a nod was as good as a wink to a blind bat. Ha, queen of all whores. Naruto cracked himself up. The looks on their faces were priceless though. He swore one of them was going to challenge him to a fight later, but he didn't care. Girls didn't know how to fight. Girls all thought fighting was a congregation of people exchanging sissy slaps and hurtful words. Basically, catfights were all talk. Sticks and stones can't break my bones, and words can't hurt me either. So there, bitches. He waved goodbye to Sasuke and ran over to his regrouping science class. Apparently there really was a fire. Some jerk in cooking class accidentally set fire to something while the teacher was out. This person supposedly didn't extinguish it. Naruto pitied the person who didn't know how to put out a fire. What a maroon. You have a good time with Sasuke. Naruto spun around, and there was Neji. He had his usual, blank look in his eyes, only brighter. Yup, he announced. He was just telling me about how all the girls were going to kill me. I think he's right. And you really don't care, do you? Neji asked like he already knew the answer. Naruto's smile broadened, nope. Neji shook his head. I figured as much. Naruto only stuck his tongue out at Neji and crossed his arms. They ate lunch at their normal spot, on the curbside next to the ramen shop. 5 minutes later, Gaara showed up. Naruto looked up from his cup of steaming ramen to find the redhead's foot about to connect with his side. Considering the fact that he had a dangerously hot and messy lunch, he couldn't do much. Gaara's foot nudged his ribs and Naruto squeaked. He was ticklish there and Gaara knew that. He playfully swiped an arm out at Gaara's leg and tugged it out from under him. Gaara allowed himself to be tripped as Naruto yanked on his foot with all his might. The blonde poked him in the side before hurriedly scooting away and devouring his ramen. Gaara let it slide. Naruto noticed that Gaara was pretty tolerant of his outstanding annoyingness as of late. The redhead hadn't punched him back as payment for the poke in the side. Plus, he got the feeling that Gaara didn't care that Naruto dragged him down. It was the love. It was all the love's fault. Love was transforming Gaara from the hardened badass he once was, to a teddy bear made out of marshmallow goo. Snap out of it, Gaara. Don't let your life be swallowed up by lovey-dovey power. Naruto watched as Gaara repetitively glanced over at Neji. His eyes would drift from the passing cars to the Hyuga, and then back to the cars. There was an unbearable film of silence in the air, so Naruto decided to smash it to pieces. You two shitheaps are about as fun to hang around with as a pile of horse manure in April. Leave it to Naruto to spoil a perfect silence. Neji glared accusingly at the source of the intruding voice. Naruto, he deadpanned, must you be so loud and obnoxious? Much to his amusement, Naruto only smiled. Of course, that's what friends are for, isn't it? He was mildly surprised that Naruto said, friends, instead of, ex-boyfriend and girlfriend. Was Naruto over him so quickly? Good, he had other things he wanted to focus his attention on. Neji's eyes sank to rest on the fluffy-looking red hair of a certain midget. Fluffy, was that really the word? Gaara didn't exactly strike him as a fluffy sort of person. But he did have inhumanly fluffy-looking hair. Neji secretly wanted to reach out and touch it. Gaara could bite his hand off for doing so, but it was worth a try. Neji leaned forward from his spot on the pavement and reached his hand out. Came the wary and confused voice of Naruto, what are you doing? The Hyuga ignored him, poking at a piece of Gaara's hair. His attention was focused wholly on the redhead. The last one of Naruto's warnings he heard was something about Gaara killing him, burying him, digging his body up again, then eating it. Did Neji care? Of course not. Neji never thought much about gay love. He always thought he was straight. He chased after a few girls, but for the most part, chicks chased after him. He couldn't really blame them, but he found himself wondering what it was like to be gay. Up until a few years ago, he'd never really thought about it. For the most part, he really didn't care. He always thought it would be just plain odd for a guy to like another guy. Then again, that was back when he was young and stupid. Gaara wasn't moving, so Neji decided to take advantage of the situation and buried his hands in Gaara's bright red hair. He smiled smugly to himself. Despite Gaara's history, his looks, and his reputation, Gaara really was fluffy after all. All Naruto could do was stare. Neji just touched Gaara's hair. By all things logical, the redhead would have at least ripped his arm off by now. Then, of course, Naruto remembered his friend's situation. Something was turning him into a marshmallow. Love. Gaara was in love. This, indeed, was proof that he would tolerate virtually anything from poking to hair groping. Naruto watched in awe as Neji ran his hands freely through Gaara's hair. He couldn't see Gaara's face very well, but he could see various expressions running through his eyes. None of which he had ever seen before. Horror, surprise, confusion, and then, dare he say it, slight embarrassment. Wow, Neji was magical. Naruto found himself wondering if the dark-haired boy would become a lion tamer or something of that nature when he got older. He'd be good at it. That much was sure. Neji had long since withdrawn his hand, and yet Gaara hadn't moved a muscle. He was still sitting in the same spot. He hadn't leapt up and eaten Neji whole yet. Ah, love, so Gaara really was in love with Neji. Naruto smiled secretly to himself. And apparently Neji liked him back. We should get going or we'll be late to class, Gaara announced suddenly, getting up and brushing himself off. Naruto blinked. It was as if nothing had ever happened. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, god damn it. Sasuke sat on the gym floor, resisting the urge to flail around on the ground in an epilepsy-like fit of scratching. His arms ached, his legs ached, and every single part of his body known to man was itching like crazy. He gritted his teeth and mentally shoved all of his pain into an imaginary closet. Unluckily for him, this closet just so happened to have a paper-thin door which exploded after 2 seconds. He survived through art class, but he had a feeling he wouldn't do so well in gym class. Aside from the itchy blood, His limbs felt like they were made of granite and the soda he drank for lunch was threatening to march its way back up his throat. Since when had withdrawal been so bad? All Kisami's fault. Yeah, just blame everything on the shark. He bit his arm when he thought no one was looking. Damn, that felt good. In a few minutes, though, he had a feeling that he wouldn't even be able to lift himself off the ground. He glanced over to his side. Naruto was orbiting around Gaara like the moon did around the earth, and Gaara was slowly circling Neji, like the earth did around the sun. Naruto eventually tackled the redhead, and Gaara retaliated by poking her in the side. Ino and Sakura were in their respective cliques, exchanging nasty glares at one another. Then Kakashi decided to pop out of nowhere and began to take roll. Sasuke sighed to himself. This class was a never-ending freak show. Kakashi stood where he normally did, making up some excuse as to why he was late. Sorry I'm late. You see, a little kitten got stuck in a tree and Sakura interrupted, and you had to walk over to your house, grab a magical pill, walk back, climb up the tree, fall off, try again, and then feed the pill to the cat so it could sprout wings and fly. Is that it? Kakashi gave her the 1,000-yard stare. How did you know? Off in the distance, Sasuke heard Naruto's muffled giggling. He only rolled his eyes. All right class, we've got some work to do. Kakashi set his clipboard down and strolled around the gym. Now, I've got plenty of magical pills at home. I've got pills that can cure headaches, that can make cats fly, and even pills that can make emo kids happy. A few Rainbow Sallies in Sakura's group chuckled at this. I do not, however, Kakashi continued, have a pill that can make this class good at dodgeball. Sasuke smiled while everyone else frowned. Some of you have gotten marginally better, but for the most part, Kakashi stopped and faced the class with his arms behind his back. You all. What? Naruto's hideously cute voice screeched. Neji, Gaara, and I have been busting our asses out here. Well, congratulations to Neji and Gaara then. What about me? Naruto, we've been playing this game for weeks, and you still don't know how to throw a ball right. Well, at least I'm better than some people. Naruto cast a glare in Sakura's direction. Oh, really? Kakashi crossed his arms. Who? Sakura isn't better than I am. Yeah, she is. What? Quite frankly, Naruto, when we have our big dodgeball game tomorrow, you won't last a second. But all Sakura does is sit in the back of the gym and talk. And all you do is jump in front of people and trip them. That was one time. Kakashi only shook his head. Here's a little motivation for you all. He cleared his throat. For each time someone gets hit by the ball, their entire team has to do 10 push-ups, then 20 sit-ups. Sasuke secretly dreaded what might happen to him. He knew he wouldn't be able to pull off all that exercise. Not in his current state. He heard Naruto whine in the distance about injustice and child labor. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Be happy that your body isn't on the verge of shutting down, bitch. For the remaining half-hour of class, Sasuke did a grand total of 120 push-ups, and 240 sit-ups. And he still sat out half of the time. He felt like hell. He was surprised at his own strength. If he could do this much when he felt like shit, then who knew how much he could do when he was feeling better? His slight enthusiasm didn't help the fact that his joints felt like they were fusing together. He still wanted to crawl into a corner and die. To add to his predicament, he was still sitting on the floor in gym class. Everyone else had run off to their respective locker rooms. He wanted his legs to move, but alas, they refused and sat motionless on the floor. He couldn't move his body by sheer willpower. He was screwed. And stuck. Damn it. Might want to get up, Sasuke. I don't want you falling asleep again. Kakashi was still there as well, tapping his foot on the floor with his arms crossed. Sasuke resisted the overwhelming urge to harp to Kakashi about making fun of things he knew nothing about. You'll be late to your next class, Kakashi stated. Do you think I don't already know that? Grumbled Sasuke. At this, Kakashi's single visible eyebrow quirked somewhat and he sat on the floor next to Sasuke. Sasuke didn't even have the energy to look over his shoulder at the gym teacher. His eyes were slowly drooping shut. He was afraid this would happen. You really are falling asleep, aren't you? Kakashi got up again and blinked down at the Uchiha. Did you get any sleep at all last night? No, Sasuke slurred. Giant spider. He wasn't in the mood to be logical. Kakashi said nothing. Sasuke drifted farther and farther into the arms of sleep. He didn't care anymore. If he fell flat on his face there and then so be it. He couldn't do anything about it. I think I'll take you to the office and call someone." Kakashi paused. He leaned down to Sasuke's level. "Wait, you don't have a someone, do you?" Sasuke thought for a moment. He didn't, did he? Orochimaru was gone. Like he'd let that bastard near him when he was asleep anyway. Kabuto was probably busy, and the nice old lady downstairs was too damn old to drive a stick. There was one person left, however. Kisame. Yeah, Kisame had to pick him up. He might lose his best customer if he didn't. What? Speak English. Call Kisame, he'll pick me up. I know he will. Kakashi sounded somewhat concerned. And who is this, Kisame, of whom you speak? He's a buddy of mine. Here's the number of the store he works at. Sasuke's mind was fuzzy. He never would have told anyone about Kisame if his brain was fully functional. This, however, was one of those rare moments when Sasuke wasn't thinking. And how will I know him when I see him? Sasuke laughed absent-mindedly. Oh, trust me. You'll know him when you see him. He yawned. I like him. He's a good friend. Nice to me too, he added sleepily. By the way, don't let him near anyone. He eats children. Oh my god. Where was Sasuke? A small gasp. Did something happen to him? Naruto wanted to mention something about Sasuke's condition to Kakashi, but he didn't. The pale Uchiha boy didn't seem like the kind of person who accepted sympathy well. Damn it, Naruto, you should have told Kakashi. That's your problem. You know things, and you never tell anyone. Did something happen to Sasuke again? Droned a slightly gloomy voice from behind him. Yeah, Shikamaru. He's not here, he wasn't looking too hot in gym class. Funny. From what I hear, he's hot all the time, Shikamaru's voice dripped with disinterest. Naruto laughed sarcastically. Ha, ha, ha. Seriously though, do you know what's wrong with him? Shikamaru only sighed. So troublesome. Naruto didn't bother asking what was troublesome, for Shikamaru had more to say. This happens all the time. You should get used to it, he droned, his head dropping down to rest on his arms. Really? Naruto asked remotely. Yeah, Shikamaru groaned, he's got some rare blood disease or something. Oh my god, he does. Naruto shrieked. That's what I heard. He paused, and don't be so loud. Iruka's looking at us. Sure enough, Iruka was glaring at them, looking like an angry owl with its feathers all fluffed out. Naruto smiled sheepishly. Sorry, he whispered. Iruka continued rambling on and on about their book reports, which were due in a few weeks. Naruto would probably procrastinate and read a book at the last minute. Or he could just do a report on something he already read. Score. Sure, it was cheating, but Iruka didn't have to know. The bell rang and Naruto stayed after school once again. Iruka, expecting Naruto to once again ask him how his day was, waited patiently at his desk with his arms folded across his lap. As he had expected, Naruto walked up to him with the inevitable question. Naruto walked up casually. Anything happened today? Seriously, Naruto, Iruka glared. What's this all about? She acted perfectly innocent as always. I'm just being nice, Iruka. Right, Iruka waved a hand in a shooing motion. He didn't want to hear her excuses. There was something up her sleeve. He knew it. I'm not stupid, you know, Iruka began only to be interrupted by a giggling Naruto. Really, you had me fooled. Iruka blushed indignantly. That's not nice. Watch yourself. Naruto's smile only widened. Iruka gave up and told him the usual story about his day. He'd been getting some pretty weird stuff in his lunch recently. There was the hot dog, a popsicle, a corn dog, a banana, and even a few sticks of Pocky, all of which were delicious. He didn't know where they came from, and he always had the most peculiar feeling when he ate them that he was being watched. Naruto was smiling at him like she knew where they all came from. Naruto, he spoke warily, leering at the blonde, you know who's giving me all that food, don't you? The girl only snickered. Who? He snapped. Is it rigged? Is it poisoned? Oh, gods, you're an alien, aren't you? Iruka was in hysterics. Naruto only shook her head. Iruka, I swear, you're a blonde in a brunette's body. Iruka was confused. Look a little deeper, Iruka. What might all that stuff mean? Iruka was clueless. The meanings behind the meanings, you idiot. Still clueless. Naruto just shook her head. Well, I'll be going now. Just think about what I said, K. Naruto left Iruka to ponder. What was this with hidden meanings? Didn't Kakashi always talk about hidden meanings? What could it all mean? What was going on? If someone was slipping him hints to something, he really didn't know what they were. Hot dog, popsicle, eating, watching, hang on a sec. It reminded him of something. What was it now? Snap. Oh, my God. Sasuke rubbed his head. Where the hell was he? He wasn't at school. Let's see. He felt horrible, he itched like there were bugs crawling inside of his skin, and he felt really tired. Ah, yes, Kisame must have shown up after all. Wait. Oh, bad. Bad. That meant that he dragged Kisame from his busy schedule to do something he probably really didn't want to do. Bad news for the Uchiha. The shark was probably terrifically pissed off. Sasuke scrambled out of his bed and shot through the door. He was halfway down the hall when he was suddenly jerked backward by the collar of his shirt. Hold on, wait, a deep voice growled. Sasuke found himself being helplessly pulled backwards. He glared accusingly into the comical face of an amused-looking shark. Good, he wasn't all that mad after all. What the hell are you doing out of bed? Kisame droned. Let's see, the irritated Sasuke hissed. My arms are itching like crazy, my stomach is doing backflips, there's a circus elephant running around inside my head, and my left leg is starting to develop a mind of its own. Well, you can forget about shooting up, Kisame warned, there's someone in the living room. She's worried sick about you. Describe this person for me. Well, let's see, she's your typical dumb blonde, has hideously sweet doe eyes, has marker all over her face, and prefers to be called Naruto the Whore Queen. Sasuke sighed and deflated noticeably. Yep, Kisame patted him heartily on the shoulder, good luck with that one. She's a keeper all right, looks like the kind of girl who, if you said you ate pussy, would probably smack you upside the head because you were cruel to cats. Ha, Sasuke laughed mirthlessly. Seriously though, you have no taste in women. Her chest is as flat as a salt plain. Kisame, yeah, shut up, Chibi Kisame, muahahaha. Chibi Sasuke, me, well, good, no good, it took me so long to write this chapter because my mind was away by Soul Calibur 3 this week. XP anyway. Chibi Naruto, watches infinitely confusing soap opera. Why is he doing the fish dance? Chibi Gaara, he's dying of a rare form of cancer, hun. Chibi Naruto, oh my god. Me, I get sick and tired of, I got lost in his her eyes scenes. They're so overrated. So I said hey, if you can get lost in someone's eyes, you can definitely get lost in their hair. Besides, I have a major hair fetish. Chibi Neji, and at long last, the first of many Nejigara fluffy scenes. Chibi Gaara, literally, there was a creepy man over at Sasuke's house last night. He circled around the room like a vulture in the sky, or perhaps a shark confined in a pool. The latter seemed more likely. He looked like a shark, he smelled like a shark, and if sharks could talk, he might have even sounded like one. His voice was rough like shark skin, and he didn't seem like the most amiable person in the entire world. In short, Naruto wasn't sure he liked him all that much. He seemed a bit too shady. What did Sasuke say his name was? Ki something or other. Ki, he knew it started with Ki, kiss. Oh yes, it started with kiss. Kiss me, Kisame, that was it. Naruto knew it was some weird name. Naruto was a strange name itself, but that was beside the point. He sat in his German class boredly tapping his fingers against the table. He wanted to go home. Speaking of home, Sasuke hadn't gotten to go over to his house yesterday. He made a mental note to himself to drag the Uchiha off to his house the next time he fainted during school hours. His morning classes went by quickly, with the exception of geometry, which was always a pain in the ass. He was walking down the hallway when he noticed something rather odd going on near the front doors of the school. He wondered curiously what it was. A crowd was gathered around outside. As Naruto wriggled his way through it, he noticed that all the people were at least 1 foot taller than him. Naruto could only figure that they were seniors, even though no one had to be that tall to be taller than him. They all sweated and reeked of body odor. Naruto was in danger of passing out from the smell, but his curiosity got the better of him and he shoved his way through. All the kids in the circle were punching the air and crying, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Interesting. He peeked around the side of an abnormally tall boy. There, in the middle of the crowd, being held by the collar of his trench coat, was none other than Gaara himself. Naruto sighed exasperatedly. Why was he not surprised? Gaara had gotten himself into one too many fights for Naruto to fear for his safety. Gaara never lost a fight. Dynamite came in small packages, did it not? And if Naruto remembered correctly, dynamite was also wrapped in red paper. Gaara was dynamite. Good for him. The greasy kid laughed. So you really are a faggot after all. Naruto lifted an eyebrow. So Gaara liked guys. That was no reason for anyone to pick a friggin' fight with him. Gaara still had his passive look plastered on his face. Put me down, was the only reply the other teen received. Naruto glared as the idiot grabbed onto Gaara's throat and shook him. Gaara, of course, stayed calm and made no attempt to pry the teen's hands off of his jacket. If he did, then he'd be giving the boy just what he wanted. Gaara didn't want that to happen now, did he? Stop, Gaara warned with a strong voice. Naruto was amazed at how he could talk like that while his windpipe was being crushed by a bodybuilder. Gaara was just magical that way. The greasy kid smirked. No, I don't think I will. You're gay. You probably don't have the guts to squish a bug. He had since stopped crushing Gaara's neck and was now once again holding him off of the ground by his collar. Gaara rolled his eyes at this, droning, bugs, no. Bugs don't bother me. I have no problem with squishing people like you, though. You talk big for a midget. Don't make me kick your ass. Bet you're too short to kick that high. In response to this, Gaara's boot-clad foot connected with the teen's groin. He howled in agony, releasing Gaara and buckling slightly. The crowd laughed and jeered. Naruto snickered. That was one advantage of being short. Gaara casually brushed himself off as if nothing had happened. You bitch. The teen bellowed hoarsely. Gaara only snorted and made his way toward the inner ring of the crowd. Naruto watched as the teen jerked him back with such force that Gaara's eyes widened ever so slightly. He quickly composed himself though, turning around to glare his annoyed little glare at the offending boy. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Stupid little faggot. You called. You admitted it then. The teen turned triumphantly to his audience. He really is a faggot. He yelled, raising his arms. Naruto coughed and fanned himself. He swore he saw two boys fall over backwards. When he lowered his arms again, Naruto felt like falling to his knees and praising whatever god there was that he had been spared. He didn't though. There were a lot of ridiculous things he didn't do. Gaara rolled his eyes as he straightened up his trench coat. The teen swaggered his way over to the redhead, dramatically leaning over to illustrate the difference in height between Gaara and himself. Then Naruto saw him do something even a kid from the Mist District wouldn't dare to do. He was sure that God himself wouldn't even risk doing it. He kicked Gaara in the face. Gaara caught himself on one elbow as he hit the ground. Naruto gasped as the rest of the crowd made surprised, oohs and ahs. Naruto gulped. He didn't even know the name of the kid who dared to kick Gaara. And now, that kid was going to die. Gaara didn't move, he didn't breathe, he didn't make a sound. The kid, assuming that he had won, gloated over this turn of events and smugly squished Gaara's back beneath his foot. He leaned down and breathed in Gaara's ear, snidely saying, and now I can go tell all my friends that Gaara of Suna is just a defenseless little faggot. Naruto's eyes widened as a fist shot up from nowhere and punched the teen right in the jaw. While the kid was recovering from the initial shock, Gaara slowly picked himself up off of the ground. He walked quietly and purposefully over to the injured boy. Yes, Gaara smiled evilly and his green eyes sparkled, it's just as you say. I'm gay. A poor, defenseless little midget. I couldn't kill a bug if I tried. I am, as you so lovingly word it, a faggot. He nailed the teen in the forehead with a single, well-aimed punch. Naruto winced. He swore he could hear something breaking. Gaara grabbed a fistful of the teen's bloody, wiry, brown hair, smiling like a lunatic. And now, his grin widened even more. You can tell your friends that you've been beaten by that faggot. Sasuke milled about outside the school as he normally did during lunch. School was boring, and lunch didn't help the matter. He wanted nothing more than to go home and sleep the day away. Sadly though, he was stuck. Stuck in a school full of nut jobs. Through his perfectly miserable state of mind, something caught Sasuke's attention. There was a rapidly growing crowd shuffling and jumping about near the front of the school. Normally, he wouldn't be interested. Sasuke, however, was incredibly bored. Boredom was lethal. He sighed and walked grudgingly over to the source of all the commotion. People were yelling and throwing their fists into the air. Must have been a fight. Fights were nothing new, but as Sasuke neared the crowd, he noticed that there were many more people there than he thought. Interesting. This might have been worth his time after all. He fought his way into the impossibly noisy group of people. As he sidestepped an incoming human projectile, he began to wonder what the hell was going on. Bodies were being launched into the air and the sounds of bone-crushing punches penetrated through the noise. Sasuke assumed that it was a one-on-one fight that turned into a free-for-all. Someone probably had a buddy who got his ass kicked, so this someone had to play hero and avenge their buddy. How typical. Go Gaara go, kick his ass. Sasuke's ears pricked. Was that Naruto? He suddenly felt the overwhelming urge to find the girl and get her away from the area as soon as possible. Why was she there in the first place? She was a prime target. Small, cute, and defenseless. Women, always getting themselves into trouble. He'd never understand them. He heard another energetic whoop. Oh yeah, take that, you just got your fat ass kicked by a fairy. Naruto's voice squeaked. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Naruto. Gaara's voice growled. Well, you're a very buff fairy, okay. Rhyming. Ow. This answer must have been good enough for Gaara, for he said nothing more on the matter and Naruto continued to cheer him on. Sasuke followed her voice through the bustling mass of teenagers. He ducked as a fist swung over his head and connected with someone else's face. He began to doubt if he'd make it out of this brawl in one piece. Another screeching human body sailed unceremoniously past his right shoulder and landed in the mud. He found Naruto at last, jumping around her friend with a concentrated glare on her face. She clenched her fists together and yelled at the top of her lungs as Gaara skillfully dodged a horrendous kick in the side. Gaara then disposed of his adversary with a swift kick in the ribs. Naruto leapt into the air and whooped like a madman. She smiled and gave Gaara a quick high five. Sasuke blinked. When Naruto smiled, her face disappeared. What the hell is going on out here? Sasuke watched as almost all movement in the crowd ceased. Even Naruto jerked her jaw shut and kept it that way. Sasuke apathetically turned in the direction of the voice. Tsunade was fuming on the top step of the school, tapping her foot angrily against the concrete. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Naruto tapping her fingers together. Gaara cast her a backward glance and rolled his eyes. Sasuke's attention was redirected to Tsunade as she snapped her fingers impatiently. Her eyes surveyed the crowd. Looking for easy prey, Sasuke supposed. You. She pointed a finger at a sickly-looking boy with blonde hair. What happened? As soon as she finished her inquiry, the kid stuttered, Tsunade definitely loved to intimidate, didn't she? She gave the kid a superiorly menacing look. I don't know, he stammered, all I know is that there was a fight because someone said someone else was gay and. You people should know better than to talk about Sasuke like that, she said with a smirk. The crowd laughed. Bitch, I'm right here, wench, Sasuke growled. The crowd gaped, and Sasuke's ego could no longer fit inside a football stadium. He took great pride in knowing that he was one of the few who could disrespect Tsunade in such a way. Oh, that's right, Tsunade waved her hand dismissively, I forgot that you were Naruto's bitch now. My bad. Sasuke's eye twitched. He was about to say something when suddenly a painful cry shot up from the background. Tsunade paid it no heed. Oh, now look, Sasuke, she feigned sorrow, you must have broken another girl's heart. Sure enough, 3 girls wove their way through the crowd carrying a rather dead-looking Ino over their heads. Sasuke swore the 3 girls had tears running down their faces. Back to the task at hand, Tsunade cleared her throat, now who really started this mess? Countless hands pointed at Gaara, who only gave them the, you are all such liars, glare. Tsunade crossed her arms. Is this true? She asked. Gaara opened his mouth, but Naruto's voice rang out. It's not his fault. Some idiot had the nerve to call him a faggot, so he got what he deserved. Quiet, brat, the principal droned. Naruto pouted and crossed her arms, trying to think of a comeback. Sasuke couldn't help but notice how damn cute she was when she did that. He swore the tempered steel plating around his heart was melting. Gaara stared peculiarly at his friend. So, Tsunade's annoyed voice made him turn his head around. He insulted me, stated Gaara easily. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, then what? Gaara coolly shifted his weight from one foot to the other, then he decided to be a smartass and he kicked me. Tsunade waited for him to continue, and I broke his face. While Tsunade contemplated Gaara's answer, Sasuke could hear Naruto adding under her breath, and his leg, and his arm, and a few of his ribs, and his back, and his neck, and his skull, and. Sasuke sighed. At least he knew now what was going on. Well, Tsunade wore her usual smug smirk, as of right now, I really don't care who started it. Because, Sasuke cringed as Tsunade's smile got bigger, you're all in detention after school. What the hell? Groans and whines were heard all around. Sasuke spat. How absurd. Most of these kids were going to skip anyway. There had to be at least 60 kids in this group. There was no way she could keep track of all of them. Right, and don't think of skipping. You might not think I'll remember your face, but you're wrong. I'm the principal and I know everything. So much for that idea. If you skip, there are consequences. And remember, I know where you live. Creepy bitch, who did she think she was? No one could make Uchiha Sasuke do what he didn't want to do. Absolutely no one. A few of the people around him looked worriedly at each other. Gaara accepted his fate and didn't protest. Naruto, on the other hand. Her arms flailed and she screeched like mad. Sasuke watched as she stomped around like an angry, pink dragon. He swore that there was smoke coming out of her ears. He shook his head. What an idiot. Tsunade smugly waved goodbye and vanished through the school doors. Sasuke cursed and shook his fist at her receding figure. How could she do this to him? He never got detention. Uchihas did not have to stay after school. He hotly repeated to himself that he was wrongly accused. He didn't do anything. Yeah, take that, bitch. Sasuke decided he'd walk over to Naruto, who continued hissing and growling angrily. So, he droned more to himself than to Naruto, I suppose I'm stuck with you for another half hour after school. Naruto's face brightened several shades. Sasuke took a surprised and alarmed step back as the sugar-high blonde tried to tackle him. As he had assumed, Naruto missed her mark and flew headlong into a conveniently placed puddle of mud. Gaara sighed, she's had one too many sugar cubes. I see, Sasuke replied as Naruto dug herself out of the mud. Her clothes were ruined, that much Sasuke knew. She only glanced at them, however, before swiftly and unexpectedly lunging out at Sasuke. This time, Sasuke didn't have time to dodge. He was bowled over by a triumphantly laughing Naruto. Thought you could dodge me this time, did you? She said with a smirk. Sasuke rolled his eyes, I did that on purpose. Oh, I'm sure, Naruto said smugly, rolling off of Sasuke. Sasuke noticed that Gaara was no longer in sight. He peered past his shoulder and lo and behold, there was Gaara. And there was Neji. His rival looked, dare he say it, somewhat concerned. Neji was frowning and pointing at a large, black bruise on the redhead's wrist. Gaara was shrugging his shoulders in his regular display of, it's no big deal, Ness. Sasuke snorted. Why did the redhead constantly have to convince others that he was just fine when he obviously wasn't? Hey Sasuke. The blonde girl's voice caught his attention. Sasuke glared up at her, what? You look, kinda, bad today. I think you should stay home. You'll fall asleep again. Sasuke picked himself off of the ground and scoffed angrily, I'm just fine. Oh, Naruto tilted her head, okay, suddenly, a mischievous gleam flashed in her eyes, 'cause if you fall asleep again, I'm gonna drag you to my house by your toes and draw things all over your face. Whatever, Sasuke said tiredly. Damn, he was doing just fine until the blonde idiot had to remind him what had been bothering him for the past few days. You're no fun at all. Naruto piped up. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. I'm not fun, Dobi. You should have known that by now. Naruto only smiled at him and flipped him the bird. Sasuke smiled at this. Two things that didn't go together at all. He supposed he and Naruto didn't fit well either, but here they were. If he had to be represented by one of those actions, he'd be the finger and Naruto'd be the smile. What's wrong with you? Naruto growled with her hands on her hips. I flip you off and it has the complete opposite effect on you. It's supposed to make you mad, damn it. Sasuke smirked, and it's supposed to make me so mad that I want to have hot, kinky, angry sex with you, right? Yeah, and wait a second. Naruto's face turned a bright pink color, that's dirty, you rat bastard. She took a swing at him. Sasuke ducked expertly and Naruto's fist flew harmlessly over his head. You know, he began as he dodged another punch, you have the worst aim I've ever seen. Oh yeah, well they say that even a girl with the worst aim can hit if she tries enough times. She lunged at him again and Sasuke sidestepped just in time. Oh please, you have the aim of a drunk, stoned cow, and the luck of a wingless chicken on a cutting board. Yeah, well yes, your mom, I don't have one, remember? Damn, Naruto snapped her fingers and assumed a meditative look. That's two people that won't work on now. Sasuke was suddenly interested. No one was more misfortunate than he was. No one could possibly surpass him in terms of a tragic past life. No, I guess Haku makes three. What, those brats could steal all of his attention. Sasuke snorted. Well, He betted that none of them had their entire families murdered by one of their own. Who's the other one then? Sasuke asked irritably. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. She began warily, Gaara. She paused for a moment. His mom got murdered by a gang. Shu something or other. Sasuke was suddenly interested. Shukaku, he clarified cautiously. Naruto blinked suspiciously at him. Yes. Her face suddenly changed. Whoa. Look what time it is. We'd better get to art class. The topic died then and there. Sasuke was reluctantly towed up the stairs by an energetic Naruto. The Dobi could be such a nuisance sometimes. He retreated into his thoughts for a moment as the hyperactive moron tugged him around a corner. He knew the name Shukaku. The gang had been around since he was born. But for some reason, all of its members vanished suddenly, leaving no clues to their fates. Sasuke suspected that another gang might have had something to do with it. His brother always used to talk to him about a group of criminals who called themselves the Akatsuki. He always spoke so highly of them, saying they were by far the most powerful and organized gang in history. If there was any criminal activity in which the Akatsuki were involved, he'd be the first to know about it. Sasuke secretly blamed this group of terrorists for the actions of his brother. Maybe it was his admiration for them that drove him to do what he did. Earth to Sasuke. Come in, Sasuke, said boy blinked as he snapped back to reality. Naruto was waving her hand in front of his face. He agitatedly swatted her hand away and glared. What do you want, Dobi? What the hell's with the Dobi thing, Mr. Pet Name Fetish? She sighed. Anyway, do you want a pop or something? Sasuke raised an eyebrow. I thought we were going to be late for class. Naruto smiled sheepishly. The clock outside is apparently 5 minutes too fast. Sasuke's voice dripped with undisguised sarcasm. So what will it be then? Naruto asked cheerily, pointing to her left. Sasuke's eyes drifted in the direction she was pointing. Off to the side of the hall was a pop machine. Was she offering to buy him something? He glanced questioningly at the blonde. I've got money to spare. Pick a drink, she said with her normally high tone of voice. Sasuke frowned. I thought you were poor. I am, Naruto squeaked, but I have money and I'm thirsty. If I get a pop, you get a pop. Sasuke was indecisive. Come on, stop being such a stick in the mud. Besides, Naruto leered, it's free for you. Good deal, right? What was she getting at? Sasuke became more than a little suspicious. There was a catch. He could smell it. If you're going to be such a snot, I have no problem with keeping my money. Have it your way. Naruto glanced over her shoulder like she was expecting Sasuke to jump at the proposal. Well, too bad, bitch. Sasuke growled inwardly. He could take care of himself. Sure, the freeness of it all was tempting, but Sasuke decided he'd be a stick in the mud as Naruto said. Rather a stick in the mud than a rat in a trap. I'm not thirsty, thanks, he said, waving her off. As he expected, the girl's face turned sour and she muttered as she got herself a pop. Damn Uchiha, not accepting his free pop offer. Now he couldn't tell Sasuke that he owed Naruto a visit at his house. His master plan had backfired. Son of a bitch, time to devise a new and better master plan. Now then. How to get the Uchiha to go home with him without having to knock him out first. Well, he'd probably end up knocking himself out by the end of the day. Toward the last 2 school periods, he would mysteriously lapse into an extremely sleepy mood. Naruto could only wonder what could possibly do such a thing to him. Maybe he was on some creepy medication thing. Or drugs. What was it that Tsunade mentioned the other day? Heroin. Maybe Sasuke was on heroin. Nah, if you don't walk faster, we are going to be late, Dobi. Naruto was now being led by an irritated Sasuke, instead of the other way around. He quickly sped up to match the pace of the Uchiha. Heroin. Well, that would explain why he acted the way he did. It would explain why he looked the way he did sometimes too. Naruto shook himself out of it. No, Sasuke wasn't on drugs. Medication, maybe, but not drugs. Sasuke was rich. Only ghetto people thought of doing things like that, right? There was no way a well-to-do person like Sasuke could possibly stoop that low. The higher you are, the farther you fall. Iruka said that once. But how could Sasuke fall? If he fell, there would be 2 feet's worth of plush leather pillows, 6 limos, his car, the hand of God, and 6 billion fangirls ready to catch him. And there would be a suave-smelling crystal elevator waiting to take him back to the top again. Naruto was put into a somewhat depressed mood when Gaara didn't show up for the duration of art class. He debated whether or not to sit with the Uchiha. He glanced over his shoulder to find a few pairs of mascara-laden, beady eyes squinting devilishly at him from one corner of the room. He couldn't sit with Sasuke. He'd be burned alive by girls. Wait, no, he'd be given a hideous makeover, have his hair dyed a horrible color, be drowned in cheap perfume, and then be burned alive. Yeah, he briefly sized up his opponents. He returned the girls' cold looks with an unexpected impish smile. Their glares faltered somewhat. He'd fight tooth and nail for Sasuke. He worked too hard and too long to lose the Uchiha to a bunch of worthless women. He was going to march over to Sasuke and give him a bear hug. Sasuke would probably hack his head off with a well-aimed karate chop, but what the hell? Naruto left his chair and began trekking toward the dark-haired boy with triumphant strides. He was afraid of nothing. He was Naruto. Naruto the whore queen. He could tell that the girls in the corner of the room were tearing their hair out in silent horror as he suddenly wrapped his arms around Sasuke. He felt the Uchiha draw in a sharp breath and sit bolt upright in his chair. He was obviously uncomfortable with the situation. Did Naruto care? Hell no. He only snuggled further into Sasuke's shoulder. Naruto, Sasuke hissed hoarsely after a long and awkward silence, get off. Upon hearing Sasuke's words, Naruto saw the opportunity to do the opposite. He squeaked and squeezed Sasuke tighter. You wouldn't do what I wanted, so why should I do what you want, huh? He asked in his cutest girly voice. Sasuke, obviously clueless, growled, what the? Naruto smiled, you wouldn't let me buy you a pop. Oh, yes, his backfired plan was coming back beautifully. That's it, you're attacking me for not letting you give me something. Bullshit. He attempted to pry Naruto's arms away, get off of me, Dobi. Only if you let me buy you a pop, Tim, said Naruto with a mischievous smile. Yes, Sasuke, let me buy you something so that you have no choice but to repay me. Oh, Naruto, you brilliant ball of brilliantly brilliant brilliance. He wanted to hug and applaud himself. Sasuke rolled his eyes and gave in. Fine, he grumbled, now get off. You're making a scene. Sure enough, everyone, including the art teacher, was staring with amusement, horror, and amazement. Naruto happily let go of Sasuke and trotted over to his desk. After class, Naruto bounced over to the fuming Uchiha. So, he piped up, you gonna, let me buy you that pop now. He was expecting Sasuke to growl and slap him, but he only grinned evilly. Confusing. Hang on a sec, what was going on? Sasuke, Naruto put her hands on her hips, what are you thinking about? Sasuke didn't answer. Instead, to Naruto's surprise and alarm, he headed off in the direction opposite the pop machine. It was alright. Sasuke was just going to the pop machine near the gym. That was quicker. Yeah, Naruto followed him through the hall. To his horror, Sasuke walked right past the second pop machine. Hold on, Sasuke, there's one right there. Naruto caught up to the dark-haired boy and tugged on his sleeve. I know, came Sasuke's smug reply. I've got my money right here. Naruto pointed energetically at a dollar bill that he pulled out of his backpack. I know, Sasuke said again. But, Naruto was confused. Sasuke had to fulfill his promise. Naruto had to take him to his house. Aren't you forgetting something? Sasuke crossed his arms smugly and leaned against the wall. No. I'm going to buy you a pop, remember? Naruto all but shouted. Sasuke smirked. Naruto didn't like that look in his eye. Something was wrong here, terribly wrong. What pop? Oh, mother. Naruto wanted to go up to him and deck him in the face. For some reason, he stood back and stomped his feet furiously. He couldn't beat up Sasuke. Sasuke was just, too, Sasuke. Naruto's jaw dropped. What? He screeched indignantly, you promised. No, I didn't, Sasuke said as a matter of factly, you merely assumed I promised. I never really said it. Bullshit. Therefore, you owe me nothing. He paused, or rather, I owe you nothing. Naruto tilted his head. What do you mean? Sasuke spat. Don't think I don't know what you're trying to do. You're luring me into some sort of trap. There's a catch. Believe me, I know when there's a catch. Bullshit. Whatever. If you want me to do something for you, just say so. Just say so. Naruto grinned like an idiot. Sasuke's demeanor faltered slightly. What? He growled warily. He eyed Naruto suspiciously. Well then, come over to my house after school today. The blonde piped up. Sasuke leered at him out of the corner of his eye. Naruto could tell he was especially suspicious of the situation. Why? He asked dryly. I've been to your house, so you're coming to mine. I'll drag you there if I have to. Of course, if I pull you there, everyone is going to see the mighty Uchiha Sasuke being dragged by his toes, kicking and screaming, by a little blonde girl. Pain, humiliation, happiness. Sasuke reluctantly agreed to go with Naruto to his house. The blonde was overjoyed, skipping happily off to the girls' locker room. When he entered the gym, he noticed that Gaara, who he hadn't seen last period, was sitting silently on the floor. Where were you? Naruto hissed. Gaara glanced at him in his usual, uncaring manner. Tsunade was going to suspend me, but she didn't. Naruto didn't ask why. Once Kakashi arrived, which, as usual, was a little late, he informed the students with a serene smile, that if they didn't win the dodgeball game, he'd cut their hearts out and eat them while they watched. Naruto liked Kakashi. He was just so damn cool. Sasuke on the other hand, who seemed considerably less impressed, rolled his eyes and looked away. Naruto frowned and huffed to himself. Right, Sasuke's too good to recognize the obvious genius Kakashi is. Moreover, he couldn't realize the super genius Naruto was. Smart. Naruto was smart, he just didn't know it yet. Grr. His train of thought was derailed with a bang as another class thundered through the gym doors. Naruto's eyebrow shot up curiously. There were a few weird-looking people in that class. One guy had dark, shaggy hair and black, beady eyes like a dog. His shirt even had an old-school logo on it. A blue husky. Naruto's eyes widened. That was his school mascot when he was still in grade school. That meant that this person went to his old school. Naruto struggled to put a face with a name, but the more aged memories in his head were covered in cobwebs. Apparently his brain needed some dusting. Another guy was, well, Naruto didn't bother thinking up a better word. This kid was fat. Fat, fat, fat. Naruto recalled seeing him a few times in the hall. He was always munching on a bag of potato chips. There were, as usual, 7 or 8 girls who saw Sasuke and made strange, cooing noises. Naruto glanced over his shoulder to see that their cooing had gotten the attention of Sasuke, who looked like he was going to get sick all over the gym floor at the very sight of them. Naruto knew that their little coos would never make Sasuke budge. Certain things only came when one performed certain calls. For example, Moose never answered turkey calls. Naruto prided himself in knowing the only call that could get Sasuke's attention. A duck call. Naruto sized up his competition as they assembled themselves at the other end of the gym. He snorted. None of them looked all that tough. Hell, this was going to be cake. You see those people over there? Kakashi indicated to the other class with a point of the finger, those are your enemies. Now, I'm feeling good today, so I'm going to put on my normal gym teacher facade and say. Dramatic entrance. Naruto jumped and squeaked. Homie god, what the flying was that? Kakashi was interrupted when the gym door behind him was suddenly jerked off of its hinges and sent crashing to the floor. Bits and pieces of brick, plaster and paint from the wall came raining down in a very low visibility dust cloud. Ah, guy, Kakashi said in a mutedly annoyed sort of voice, I thought you were a bit late. Naruto watched in rapt fascination as a short-haired man emerged from the cloud, brushing himself off. Ah, rival Kakashi, the man exclaimed enthusiastically, with all due respect, Team Guy will emerge victorious from this battle of wits and strength. And balls, Naruto added with the part of his conscience that Jiraiya built. Kakashi had that ambiguous blank look in his eye as he stared at the other teacher. He only shook his head and said nothing. Good luck trying to beat our elite skill and strategy, rival Kakashi. Naruto watched with interest as this person glided over to his half of the gym and began to take roll. The blonde shook his head. This guy was just too weird for his liking. He was a friggin' screwball. Naruto turned to Gaara, saying, what kind of dumbass runs around breaking doors down anyhow? That one, Gaara said pointedly. Naruto rolled his eyes, that was a rhetorical question. You don't know what that means. Fine. Naruto crossed his arms and angrily screwed up his face. Gaara knew too much. Where's Lee? Naruto snapped his head over in the direction of the other class. Guy had an unusually astonished look on his face. A girl with her dark hair tied back in 2 identical buns raised her hand. Yes, Ten. I haven't seen him today, sensei. I think he's sick or something. What? Guy assumed a look of deep thought, he's never missed school. Even when he had influenza he didn't miss school. I thought he got hit by a truck, Tenten said with a confused tone. No, it's called the hit by a truck flu because that's how one feels. Not because they got run over. Clear. Yes, sensei. Has anyone seen Lee? Guy asked worriedly. Naruto and Gaara both looked at each other. Gaara shrugged his shoulders. Naruto looked back over at Guy. Naruto was profoundly confused. When he was sick, he jumped at the chance to stay home and do nothing but sleep and eat ramen. Lee, never missed school. He never experienced the joy of skipping. Was he self-destructive or something? Lee was in a few of my classes last year. Neji had relocated himself to Gaara's side and was explaining the situation. He was always at school, sick or well, and he did all the extracurricular activities he could do. He was constantly trying to do his best, the fool, but no matter how hard he tried, he had a C+ average in school. So, Naruto had a C+ average too. Hi's suspicions were confirmed. Lee didn't know how to have fun. Neji smirked. He was constantly blabbering about how he'd beat me in anything, spots, academics. And we all know that would be impossible, Gaara muttered. Naruto blinked. What was this? Good-natured sarcasm from Gaara. Holy Jesus. Neji fell silent for a moment, casting a look at Gaara that Naruto couldn't read. Anyway, he never did. I aced tests, ran faster, and got more fan mail than he ever did. Come to think of it, I don't think he's ever gotten a single love letter in his life. Naruto spat at him. He was getting a little too. So he's gotten no fan letters, and you've gotten, what, one? Naruto sneered. 121, Neji said as a matter of factly. Damn you, Naruto gritted his teeth. Do you count them or something? Gaara muttered with a peculiar look on his face. Neji just gave him another one of his looks. Naruto was getting annoyed. Did they have some sort of secret body language code? Gaara replied to Neji's stare with an uncaring shrug of the shoulder. Kakashi had wandered over to Guy and Naruto could hear the two of them speaking. I guess we'll just have to start without him, Kakashi said with a smug undertone in his voice. Guy muttered a bit, then condescended and made his way, defeated, back over to his class. A few minutes later and both classes were lined up against opposite walls. It's about time, Naruto heard Gaara growl to himself. He smiled. His friend always did love beating the shit out of other people. Ready, and, bang, Guy was about to blow the whistle, when the gym door, which Guy had knocked down and had been put back into place by Kakashi, was suddenly re-floored and the dust on the ground flew up into the air once again. I'm here, Guy-sensei. A voice rang out. Guy's eyes misted over and a ridiculous smile wormed its way onto his face. He enthusiastically spread his arms and rushed in the direction of the dust cloud. Lee, what the hell was going on? Sasuke swore that Team Guy couldn't get much weirder. They were even more screwed up than his class. He couldn't hide his befuddlement any longer. When the door dropped for the second time, Sasuke could do nothing but stare with a look of the most profound confusion plastered on his face. The boy who burst through the door a split second ago was dashing toward Guy with tears sparkling in his eyes. Sasuke peered closer at the two of them. He blinked once. They had exactly the same haircuts. And expressions. And outfits. And eyebrows. What the? This, Lee, person was just a mini guy. Were they related or something? Sasuke continued to stare and his eye couldn't stop twitching. The two freaks met at the center of the gym floor in a tearful reunion. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Enough already. Sasuke thought his eyes were going to melt and his brain was going to bleed out of his ears if he withstood a moment more of this. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Sasuke wanted to scream. The repetition of it all tempted him to the point where he almost did scream obscenities at the top of his lungs. As a matter of fact, he was going to, until Naruto's voice interrupted him. Ah, make it stop. My ears are bleeding, she harped in her bitchy voice. Yes, get on with it, Gaara added in his usual annoyed way. Neji only rolled his eyes. Sasuke sighed in relief as the incessant name repetition stopped. The two didn't seem to care about the people who were so recently insulting them, as they continued their conversation. Guy-sensei. Forgive me, I was late, Lee whined enthusiastically. Nonsense. You're right on time, Guy exclaimed. Thank you, Guy-sensei. Yes, he paused and his face went from euphorically happy to hellishly angry, just remember never to be late again. Lee started to cry. I won't, Guy-sensei. To Sasuke's ever-growing confusion, Guy's face lit up and the tears returned to his eyes. That's the spirit. Hug. The both of them were smiling again in a great bear hug. Sasuke shook his head unbelievingly, as did the rest of the class. The other class, on the other hand, hung their heads in slight embarrassment, as if all of this had happened so many times before. It probably had, Sasuke concluded. He looked over at Naruto, whose comical expression almost made him laugh out loud. She was stomping about in her usual pissed pink dragon princess manner while gritting her teeth, clenching her fists, and growling. Gaara was leaning off to the side and looking on like he didn't know her, and Neji was right beside him doing the same. Poor unfortunate souls. He pitied the people who had been dragged by their toes into being friends with her. Then again, wasn't Sasuke friends with her? Check that, he was her boyfriend now, wasn't he? He laughed to himself. Another thing added to his list of why people should be sorry for him. Lee waved an exaggerated farewell to his teacher before lining up on his side of the gym. Guy picked up where he left off. Ready, and, go. The bushy-browed teacher blew the whistle and both sides sprang into action. Sasuke wasn't in his most energetic of moods, so he let everyone else do the work for him. They'd go to the front and either retrieve a ball, or get hit by one first. In no time at all, Sasuke was chucking the foam objects all around the room. He picked off the weak-looking people first. He figured he'd lower their numbers before he took his chances at the better players. To his surprise, that goofy, Lee, kid, who acted like the king of the pansies earlier, was actually pretty fast. He dodged right and left, jumped and ducked, bobbed and weaved. He threw pretty well too. He heard another person on his side of the gym moan in pain. Meanwhile, Lee was on the opposite side, looking triumphant and sorry at the same time. Now, Sasuke, as usual, was feeling incredibly tired due to the mystery ingredient in his heroin. Therefore, he was only mildly surprised when he got pegged in the side by a ball. He angrily looked down on the offending ball before stalking out of the war zone. Under normal circumstances, he'd be mad as hell. But he was too tired to throw a temper tantrum. He figured he'd be back on the floor in no time at the rate Gaara was going. The red-headed wonder caught every single ball that flew his way. The other team was purposely not throwing balls in his direction for this reason. Gaara though, being the person his reputation warned to be, jumped at the chance to cause any misery to the other team. He jumped in front of other people just so he could catch whatever ball there was and watch the person who threw it drag their body across the floor and into the outline. And where was Naruto during all this? The girl was scampering about like a crazed lunatic, throwing balls this way and that. To Sasuke's surprise, despite how high she aimed, she wasn't out yet. By all means, someone should have caught the ball she threw by then. Odd, her skills had improved, slightly. Sasuke watched as a little, blonde head of hair skittered across the floor. She squeaked as a ball nearly sailed headlong into her shoulder. She swooped down and picked up a green ball, using it to deflect another one before she pegged someone in the leg with it. You're up next, duck hair. Sasuke glared accusingly at his teacher, who glared right back. You know about that, he grumbled to Kakashi. The silver-haired man only gave him a blank look. Sasuke, everyone knows about that. Sasuke rolled his eyes. So, you feeling well enough to keep playing? Kakashi said with a hint of worry in his voice. Sasuke glared. Of course he was well enough. He didn't need anyone worrying about him. He was just fine. Just fine. I'm not 2 years old, you know, he growled, I can take care of myself. Suit yourself, the man said knowingly, Kakashi mumbled in third person. Sasuke snorted. He returned his attention to the game. His eyes followed Gaara. If anyone was going to catch the ball that set him free, though he hated to admit it, it was going to be Gaara. You're up, Kakashi said offhandedly. Sasuke looked questioningly at the teacher. Gaara hadn't done anything yet. Was this some stupid, doesn't make sense, lame-ass, random trick? As if reading his mind, Kakashi replied, your girlfriend caught it. Sure enough, there was Naruto, dancing around the floor with a ball in her hands. Sasuke didn't ask. He meandered back onto the floor, dodging a ball as it flew off to his right. He sighed. He'd been doing a lot of dodging today and it was beginning to make him sick. Naruto seemed to be in a one-on-one battle with the kid who looked like a dog. The shaggy-haired boy threw a ball at her and she jumped to the side, then growled, then muttered to herself, then shook her fist and yelled in a swear every other word fashion. Sasuke decided to leave her alone for the while. He wasn't feeling remotely compassionate toward her like he was in the morning. She needed to deal with her own problems. He picked up a ball, wondering remotely where Lee was. Maybe kicking the pansy's ass would brighten his day. Uchiha-san, an annoying voice called from the other side of the gym, over here. Sasuke jerked his head over in the direction of the voice. He immediately found what he was looking for. There was Lee. He was standing off to the side with the most peculiarly determined expression on his face. His eyes were straightforward, looking at Sasuke, his bushy eyebrows were knit together in concentration, and his lips were pressed together in a thin line. Wary of his surroundings, Sasuke wandered over to Lee. Much to his surprise, instead of saying, "Psyche," and throwing a ball in his face, Lee started a monologue. "Sakura-chan likes you a lot," he exclaimed. News flash. "Whenever I ask her out, she always goes and says something about how she loves you so much more. She tells me about how much better your hair is than mine, how much prettier your eyes are than mine, and how much thinner your eyebrows are than mine. True, so true, she thinks I'm a good for nothing when compared to you. So I'm going to prove to her that I'm the best." And how did he propose to do that? A pussy fight. By defeating you. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. Lee grabbed a nearby ball and chucked it at Sasuke. The black-haired boy leaned to his other side just in time for the ball to glide past him. Well, that was unexpected, wasn't it? Quick as lightning, Lee flung another foam projectile at him, which he ducked and rolled past. As soon as he got up, he had to dodge again. Jesus Christ, this kid was serious. Sasuke found his hidden reserves of energy and promptly put them to use. He flung a ball at Lee, which the green-clad kid danced nimbly away from. Sasuke was dumbfounded. Here was someone he just might have to take seriously. "It's no use, Uchiha-san. I'm too fast for you," Lee yelled with utmost seriousness. For once, Sasuke had to agree. He barely jumped aside in time for another ball to bounce past. Damn it, his mind was getting blurry and his movements were becoming sluggish. His arms and legs felt like they were made of sand. At this rate, he wasn't going to last much longer. His prediction proved true when a ball smacked him in the chest. Hard. Sasuke lost his balance and fell backward, teetering on one foot before hitting the ground and getting the wind knocked out of him a second time. What was wrong with him? He wasn't nearly as fast as he normally was, his mind was a muddled mess, and he felt an odd, burning sensation in the back of his head. What really troubled him though, was the fact that he couldn't move. He willed his arms to pick him up off of the floor and his legs to walk him out of the way, but none of these things happened as all of Sasuke's body refused to budge. To his relief, his immobility lasted only a few seconds and he painstakingly lifted himself off of the floor. Sasuke-tem. Sasuke's eyes focused, seeing an upset-looking Naruto sitting off on the sidelines. She was jumping up and down, screeching something to Kakashi, who was already walking in his direction. Sasuke looked around. The entire game was put on hold. Both classes were staring at him. How embarrassing. Yo, Kakashi had his attention again, you alright? Sasuke growled irritably, rubbing the back of his head. Yes, he growled, I'm fine. Sasuke stopped suddenly when he felt something wet and sticky clinging to his hair. He brought his hand to his face, hissing when he saw that it was covered in blood. Shit, fine, huh? Kakashi walked closer. You know, I think a week off would do you good. Eat, sleep, see a doctor. You're not my mom, Kakashi, Sasuke snarled. You know, Kakashi said with a blank look in his eye, I really don't give a. Sasuke debated whether or not to remark on that last statement, and chose not to. He resigned without another word and followed Kakashi. I'm taking this one to the office, Kakashi sighed tiredly to his rival, he's been acting funny lately. Continue the game without us. Sasuke silently followed him out the door. He was dimly aware of Naruto's eyes following him worriedly until the door closed behind him. Sasuke had opted to stay quiet, and Kakashi said nothing. In short, it was a long, quiet walk to the office. Sasuke, who normally liked peace and quiet, was finding it harder and harder to stand. Must have been from being around Naruto too much. The absence of her endless ramblings was somewhat creepy. Sasuke ran another hand through his hair, trying to keep the blood from dripping in a trail behind him. Kakashi noticed this, speaking up at last, I suppose I should have grabbed you a paper towel or something. Smart thinking, Sasuke remarked sarcastically. He tossed Sasuke the jacket he was wearing, which Sasuke caught on one arm. He glanced down at it. What's this for? He asked, already knowing the answer. Use it to keep the blood off of the floor. It's old, and I'm getting a new one. I don't need it anymore. Sasuke was going to protest, but Kakashi interrupted. Just put it on your head. Whatever, he gingerly held the jacket against his head. He sighed. Naruto was going to kill him for this. No, wait, she'd probably duct tape him to his bed and make him sit there while she cooked him some kind of chicken soup or something. The girl was convinced that he was ill. Perhaps that was for the better. God knew how she'd react if he told her the real reason. They walked into the office, Sasuke after Kakashi. Kakashi coughed to get the attention of an office aide behind a desk. What do you want? Came the squeaky voice of a frail-looking girl with glasses and freckles. I want a number 4, a Sprite, 2 large French fries and an apple pie. When the girl looked at him strangely, a voice came from around the corner in the principal's office. I'll deal with Kakashi. You just answer the phone, MMK. Interesting. Tsunade seemed to be in a good mood today. Sasuke snorted to himself. That was probably because she was seeing half of the student body after school today, him included. Sadistic little bitch. The blonde principal sauntered out of her room. All right, Kakashi, what is it this time? He pointed a finger at Sasuke, who glared furiously at Tsunade. Sue, the brat broke his head open. When's the party? Ha, ha, I hope you pick on Naruto as much as you do to me, Sasuke muttered unhappily. Oh, believe me, hun, she said knowingly, I do. She changed the subject, redirecting her attention to Kakashi, so what went down this time? He did, Kakashi said quite literally. Shizune's out, but I think I can manage, she said absently, step into my office. All three of them strolled into the office and Tsunade shut the door. So, anyone mind telling me what the hell's going on here? Tsunade reclined in her chair, propping her feet up on her desk. As you know, some strange things have been happening lately, Kakashi put on a show of being deeply thoughtful. Oh, get on with it. Right, well, I can't say I was watching, but I heard. Bullshit, Kakashi, you're like a stalker when it comes to watching people. Get on with it. Sasuke didn't bother listening to the story. Here he was, with blood dripping out of his hair, and these two dimwits were joking around. It sort of reminded him of a movie he once watched because Shikamaru wanted him to. He recalled coming very close to laughing his ass off. There was a scene in this movie in which the Black Knight got all of his limbs cut off. 'Tis a flesh wound, later, and Sasuke's head was finally bandaged up. About time too. Kakashi's jacket was ruined. You don't have a concussion. Tsunade droned, don't ask me to prove it to you. I know these things. You might be injured and in excruciating pain, she said monotonously, but you've still got to stay here. God knows what will happen to you when no one's watching. Tsunade glared briefly. Oh, so she was God all of a sudden. Bullshit, and you're staying here for detention. I'm not letting you worm your way out of that. Figured, she wanted to keep him locked up where she could keep an eye on him. From the moment Tsunade saw him, she knew everything there was to know about him. Sasuke could tell. Principals were screwy that way. Tsunade dismissed him the way she normally did. Now get your little Uchiha butt up to English class. And don't fall asleep. The last thing you need is more attention. What was the Uchiha's problem? Had his illness affected the density of his skull or something? Naruto could fall on his head from the monkey bars at elementary school and live to tell the tale. That was probably because his skull was thicker than the hull of a ship, but that was beside the point. Naruto. Iruka had finished passing out worksheets for the day, and was now standing timidly next to the blonde's desk. Yeah, he answered unknowingly. Could I talk to you after school? Naruto grinned evilly. He knew what this was about. Sure. Thanks. Iruka squeaked nervously and stalked over to his desk. Maybe the little cogs in Iruka's brain were turning now. The look he had on his face suggested that he finally found out the meaning of those little edible gifts he kept getting. Halfway through class, the door slammed. Naruto jumped in his seat, startled. Sasuke had found his way in and was now lurking in the spot where he usually was. Shikamaru spared him a glance before promptly going back to sleep. Whatever had put the almighty Uchiha in such a fine mood? Probably the fact that he was still in school. He looked angry, so Naruto didn't bother trying to get his attention. He made his way over to Iruka's desk when the bell rang, saying, "Alrighty. Make it quick, I've got to go to detention after school." Iruka hesitated. "I haven't got all day." Naruto whined. Iruka hesitated once more. His eyes shifted from one corner of the room to the other. He almost whispered, "It's Kakashi, isn't it?" Naruto pretended not to know. The one who's been putting all that stuff in my lunch. And all that stuff is supposed to tell me something, and I think I know what it is. Splurge. Naruto leaned on his desk and smiled eagerly. Does he like me as much as I like him? Naruto saw the window of opportunity to torture the poor, confused teacher. Why don't you ask him yourself? You know I can't do that. Iruka's face turned a deep red as he hissed at his student. You're never going to get any closer to him unless you talk to him, you know. Iruka sighed. You're right. Of course I am. I'm always right. Naruto squealed. Iruka groaned sarcastically. He tapped his fingers on his desk for a moment or two. But what will we talk about? What if he thinks I'm boring and stupid and he hates me? What if he doesn't want to talk to me anymore after that? Gods, what if he... I swear, Naruto said as he began to walk toward the door, you're a girl in a man's body. I thought I was a blonde in a brunette's body. You're both happy. Not really. That was a rhetorical question. You don't know what that means. Fine. With that, Naruto walked out the door.